Maybe they have.
Welcome into another episode of Guerilla Sports Off Ice, brought to you by our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American's salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. Go to trustedamerican.com and see how much money they can save you today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Welcome in Guerilla Sports Off Ice. I'm Jesse Montano. That's Meghan Angley. Meghan, it feels like we were just doing this like 5 minutes ago.
It does. Even though a decent amount of time has passed, I got a great night's sleep. It still feels like I was just here.
Feels like we were just here watching the Avs. Not have a great one last night, Meghan. It was 5-3, but you and I think we're both pretty much in step that score was probably closer than the game was.
It was. I still carry frustration over the result just because I knew Carolina was a good team going into it. So I think my expectation was even, I don't know that they win this game necessarily, but because they brought it within one goal at one point, that shows you they still should have, as depleted as they are, been capable of a much better outing. And to do all of it so late in the game, I think that's what added to the frustration of you're capable than more than this if you're the Colorado Avalanche, and you just didn't do enough.
It's just such a, again, we go back to what Scott Wedgewood said when he got to town and then what he repeated in the locker room after playing in a winning effort for the Avs in Buffalo. This team is never out of it because of the elite high-end talent they have, because of the potency of their offense, and it's what makes it so frustrating when you see games like last night where they wait until the last 5 minutes to turn it on. It's like, yeah, you could have done this the whole time and you would be in much better shape. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to get into the weekend ahead for the Avs, the importance of this back-to-back coming up, as well as potentially some reinforcements on the way. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into some specifics from last night, Meghan, in particular the goaltending, Nathan MacKinnon. We're going to key a little bit more in on Casey Mittelstadt. And then we will just kind of a day later, I think you and I both go home after the game or after the show and do some rewatching and some reanalyzing of some stuff. So we'll just touch a little bit on that. But I do want to start with the big news. Actually, you know what? I do. How else are you doing? You got a good night's sleep. How are you doing today? It's Friday, beautiful day out. How are things going?
Really good. My Christmas tree is up. It's been kind of a process because when I went to set it up, the lights I had from last year died. So I had to get some new lights. So it's finally pretty much up and running. I still need to add a few more ornaments.
So not a pre-lit tree, gal.
No. It's a fake tree, and I call it the Ozempic tree. I have to take a picture of it. It's this tall, skinny little thing, and I'll take a picture.
We a couple years ago when we lived in an apartment downtown, we had an Ozempic tree because it just made a little more sense. And like we got it because it was like I think we were like, oh, it looks kind of rustic, it's thinner and it looks, and like it was nice. It looked nice, but.
It does. Yeah, no, I love it.
Hilarious.
It makes a lot of sense.
That is so damn funny, Meghan. Yeah, my wife had us go to a pre-lit a couple years ago. And at first I was like, oh, lame. It's really nice. It's just very convenient. And so like my tree growing up and like the tree that my parents still have, you put up the base and then you had to put in like each branch.
Yeah.
This one's just like 3 sections and you fluff it a little bit.
I like that.
Yeah, it's much better. It's nice to have the tree up. It's just like an extra little source of warm, cozy lighting.
Yes.
It sets the stage for the season. Okay, we can get into some hockey stuff here. Meghan, this one wasn't a shocker because we had seen it being reported on for the last number of days. Jacob Trouba, officially done as a New York Ranger. He is sent as far west as he could be sent from New York. He goes to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a conditional 4th-round pick and Urho Vakanainen. Meghan, I felt a little silly not knowing who Urho Vakanainen was. And I said, oh, Megan's going to get here the prospect queen and is going to make fun of me for not knowing who this top flight prospect is. This is a 25-year-old former first-round prospect from 2017. Has never established themselves really as a full-time NHLer. Finally, last year stuck with the Ducks for 68 games and is currently on the IR. Can you help me make sense of this at all? I mean, like, I know Trouba is not, a bona fide top pairing defenseman. He's the captain of the New York Rangers, has a big impact on that locker room, and they kind of just chipped him out for peanuts.
I think it points to the desperation with the New York Rangers and how much this relationship had soured with Trouba.
Mm-hmm.
It's concerning, truthfully,
Yes.
to have your captain, somebody who's worn the sea now 2 seasons, shipped out under such desperate, panicked circumstances. Because you look at Anaheim being the trade partner, and they were staring down putting him on waivers and just letting a team claim him because they were trying to navigate his no-move clause and not having much luck. And he exercised his rights as a player to kind of stand firm, stand pat in that. And I think it just points to just how toxic things had grown with the organization and this player. And it's concerning on the heels of Barclay Goodrow, who New York did the same thing to, shipped him out west, essentially.
Yep.
But they did end up doing the waiver move. He goes to the San Jose Sharks, getting as far away from New York as possible, too. I have to imagine if you're a player looking in on this,
Right.
no move clause or not, New York is going to finagle a way to get rid of you if they are not happy with your fit in the organization. And everything I know about Trouba as a person points to a really upstanding guy with great character. I do not like the way that he plays hockey. I think he toes that line not so well, pushes the envelope to the point of hits that I think the game is trying to remove. He gets away with more times than I'm comfortable. But I actually think he's a really good guy. And I don't doubt that in the locker room then, there was probably a different reception from his own teammates than what the organization viewed him as. So I find it really troubling just with management front office in New York specifically, and kind of too then where this team is at. It's a team that should be pushing for playoffs and a deep playoff run again. And I do think it's concerning that I don't even think their results have been that bad. They've maybe comparable to the Avs, a little bit better.
Yeah.
But they're not as depleted. And I think the concern is the salary. He ate up $8 million and did kind of fall from being a bona fide top pair defenseman, and his physical game waned a little bit this year, which I realize is silly to say in talking about Jacob Trouba, but I think that what he did well, they saw less of in this season, and they needed to evaluate their cap situation and their team's needs and part ways with their captain, I guess.
So I could not agree with you more that, like, this is a, if you're the Rangers, like this, people were talking about how the Avs trading Justus Annunen was a panic move. Well, it was a backup goalie swap. This, Megan, feels to me like a panic move. You just dumped off your captain for a guy that, maybe will fit into your decor this season, maybe, if he gets back healthy. And then a 4th-round pick. This, to me, feels like a move for the sake of making a move. Things aren't, because, like, you didn't move the needle with anything you brought back. You cannot say that the Rangers got markedly better today. They lost leadership. They lost a key guy in their room, and they didn't add anything significant. This, to me, feels like a move for the sake of making a move because the season has not gotten off to the start you wanted it to. Let me read this from our great friend Peter Baugh. Shout out Peter Baugh, now covering really all of the New York area teams for The Athletic. The most recent Rangers captains, the last 4 Rangers captains, Megan. Jacob Trouba, traded. Ryan McDonough, traded. Ryan Callahan, traded. Chris Drury, current GM, bought out to end his career. So Chris Drury was bought out by the Rangers, now back running things there. He's being named captain, kind of like
death sentence.
Yeah, the new Mark Bergevin. He's not getting traded. Then you get traded the next day. He's being named the New York Rangers captain. The new, like, you're on the clock. Time's up. You're getting out of here soon. That's what it feels like.
It feels too, to set that precedent, then difficult for whoever is going to be named captain in their place. Like the pressure then of what it means to be a captain in New York, it's really different than what it means to be a captain on other teams. There is an expectation that you have to meet as a captain, which I think is true of any captain around the league, but it feels impossible to meet in New York.
Right. Well, it feels like, again, like the Avs, especially if he was healthy, would never even consider trading Gabe Landeskog unless they were at the very end of their window, end of his career, and he's looking for a Stanley Cup. Like I just can't imagine they would ever move him because of what he means to the team. And I feel like that's what most teams are like when you're talking about their captain is this is a player whose contributions go beyond just what they bring on the ice. To dump him off like this for nothing, again, it sends just a really weird message. And to your point about feeling weird about being there in that management group, I also feel like you're just continuing putting yourself you're starting to put yourself in a position where it's like, well, who would want to sign there as a free agent?
I think they're going to run into some trouble. Like the immediate consequence of it might not be fully realized, but I think that this is something that players are already discussing after Barclay Goodrow. And I think this is only going to exacerbate it. I look too at the difference in like Tampa and Stamkos. You saw that he was on the back half of his career and the type of money that he wanted didn't really make sense anymore in Tampa. Right. And it felt like there was more acknowledgement, at least, in what he meant to that organization before his departure. I think this does still go back to his contract in New York, similarly to Stamkos and what his contract would have been if he'd stayed on there. $8 million was just too much, and they were in cap hell. New York too. They had absolutely no flexibility. I think that is the only benefit I can see of this in severing ties to him. I imagine something grew toxic too, but which came first? Did it become toxic because you were trying to move this player to clear cap space, or for other reasons, or did it become toxic after that?
And I guess that's the part to me that, again, is just so, I'll stop short of using the word shocking, but it's just surprising is like, what went so wrong with the captain of your franchise? And I believe he was only the captain for the last 2 seasons. So this is someone that the organization thought very highly of. Recently, post-pandemic. And now for it to have gone so poorly to the point that they're shipping him out for a $1 million defenseman and a 4th-round pick. It's just, what happened there? What went so wrong so quickly?
It's hard to say. I think it all comes back to the money and New York's situation with it not being able to justify, and Anaheim being able to afford that kind of money. They have lots of cap space available and a need for stronger, more veteran presence on their back end. So I guess it makes sense. And they've had no shortage of 1st through 3rd round draft picks in the last 3 drafts. That is not meant as an insult. It's genuinely true. It's like 18 players. Yeah. So they can part ways with a 4th round pick very easily and a former 1st round pick who wasn't even drafted in their organization. Yeah,
no, you're totally right. And I mean, look, Jacob Trouba's play had dropped off by a lot. So you have to imagine that plays a large factor in what we're talking about here, that this is a team that's trying to get right. Clearing up that cap space helps. But again, I really do, in a vacuum, just a little bit of a surprising deal.
I think the consequences of the cultural implications are bigger than clearing up some cap space. How nice is that? I think they're going to have to pay more than this than they realize.
I agree with you. All right, Megan, let's and we don't have to spend a ton of time. We did 3 shows last night, intermissions, post-game. So we don't have to spend a ton of time walking through last night's game, but I just kind of want to get your overall thoughts. The Avs got off to an okay start in the first few minutes, end up scoring the first goal, but it really felt like from the moment they scored that first goal, things just kind of started to slide away from them there, and they never really regained control of the pace of the game. In Carolina, I felt like for sure for the first two periods and a large portion of that third just kind of were able to impose their will on the Avs, control the puck when they wanted to control it, keep the play alive in the Avs zone when they wanted to. Did you have any thoughts after digging in any more into last night's game?
I think just sitting away from it, my frustrations with it, what I took issue with, what didn't go so well, I think started to become a little bit clear. I was able to maybe simplify it from what I was trying to talk about last night. And I feel like the Avs anticipated the high volume shooting aspect of Carolina more than they did the strong defensive structure of Carolina. And so I actually think they did some things well defensively to try and counter what Carolina does well in terms of moving the puck in the offensive zone. They still fell short, just to be clear. But they also fell short in an area of their game that is usually one of their strongest. That's their possession game. They were unable to generate very much of meaning offensively, and it's because Carolina is a good defensive team, good lane management. And so Colorado wasn't able to cycle the puck and create any sort of passing plays in Carolina's end because Carolina was stifling a lot of their chances in blocking shot lanes and passing lanes. And there was a disconnect on the Avs side of it too, and not being able to find their players and get passes tape to tape. And I think that points to kind of the mental disconnect that we talked about. But I also just don't think the Avs had a great answer to counter what Carolina does well defensively. And it feels a little frustrating because it's an area of their game that they usually do well, to the point of overcycling the puck sometimes. That's sort of what we saw on the power play too, that I think the disconnect hurt them the most. And I think the power play as a takeaway from this game is obviously a larger problem too. So I think that's the other kind of takeaway in last night is they really need to sort this out. They don't want to be a team that relies just on special teams to win games. Their 5v5 game needs to be in check too. But right now they are losing the special teams battle. And for a team that has had a highly touted power play for so many years now with such great personnel, it needs to be better. That's the bottom line.
It needs to be better, I think, is a great way to sum up what we saw on the special teams. I think on both ends of the puck. And like we discussed last night, what's concerning, what was the word that you used last night? What maybe it was, I'm concerned.
It might have been concerned.
Might have been concerned. What's concerning about the power play is that they aren't even getting looks. Like it's not just that they're on a cold streak right now. It's not just that they're not converting. Like they're not even getting the zone. And we talked a little bit about the zone entries last night and how it maybe feels like what they're doing, not just the drop pass in the neutral zone, but it's actually that second drop pass once they get inside the blue line that has gotten stale, that has gotten, I think, predictable was a word that you used a lot last night when talking about the way that the Avs are trying to establish themselves on the power play. And you need to shake it up. It feels like they're just kind of repeating the same thing. They moved Val Nichushkin back to that top power play unit, but there hasn't been a lot of change on that top unit. And to me, it looks stale. When on the rare occasion they get set up, I feel like teams have really gotten aggressive on the three guys out high. That umbrella has really gotten aggressive, not giving Mikko Rantanen, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar a lot of time to make decisions. And it feels like a lot of the time that puck is going into the bumper spot and they're trying to kick it right back out, trying to get that extra deception, and they're just not putting enough pucks to the net. Val Nichushkin scores that late goal last night as the extra attacker, being in front of the net, punching rebounds home. You got one of your net front. You actually got two of your net front guys back in Lehkonen and Nichushkin. I think that power play needs to simplify a lot from what we're seeing right now.
I think we've kind of talked about this as it applies to other games too, but I think the worry is when they have abandoned things that have worked for them well to be a little more creative, take a few more risks, they've made mistakes and it's exposed vulnerabilities and rushed chances the other way. And I think there's a fear to abandon what they know is working for them right now because things have not been going well on the whole. Like they're still trying to get out of a little bit of a rut. And I think there's a stubbornness then to abandon what has worked well for them. But the problem is what has worked well has become predictable. And I think a strength of their game on the power play has been creativity, on the fly adjustments. And I think that that's where they've lost some of their real deception. And they're in their heads a little bit too much in what they're trying to do. We kind of talked about it with Casey Mittelstadt, but sometimes being in search of the perfect play just gives the other team too much time and space to counter what you're trying to do. I think that's what they're running into a lot on the power play.
I'm with you. Last thing I want to talk about from last night was, we heard a lot of conversation about that late push that the Avs were able to make. I have it in my notes here, Megan, that late push didn't really feel overwhelmingly positive to me. I didn't like the process in the third period. I didn't like the level of desperation. I didn't feel like the compete level elevated the same way that it needed to. We said last night, do they even get partial credit for those 2 goals late to make the game interesting in the dying minutes?
No, I probably will disagree with myself in the future that I don't believe in partial credit. But I go back to the clean room analogy. Just because you picked up your clothes and moved them in the closet doesn't mean your room is clean.
Yeah.
So you can't say, well, I tried to clean my room. No, it's still dirty.
Yeah.
Because there is a full 60 minutes that you could have made your life a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, desperate hockey in that late push costed them too. They have a too many men penalty and a Mikko frustration penalty in that third period as well. That's the problem with the desperate late panicked push in the game, is you also make mistakes. So it kind of neutralizes everything that you tried to do.
Panicked push, I feel like, is a great way of describing that instead of desperate. And those are very different words. Desperate and panicked in this context. To me, that last night was a panic effort at the end of the game.
I think you're right. There is a distinction, because I used to kind of view them similarly, but I've even heard coaches talk about appreciating desperation in their players when they are trying to get out of ruts. And so I think you're right to make a distinction. It was panicked more than it was desperate.
I completely agree. I want to dive more into some specifics from last night, particularly Scott Wedgewood. You said Scotch last night, and that's now all that comes to my head.
Because of the wedge.
Scott
Thank you.
Wedge.
Thank you.
Yes. So I want to talk about him in particular because I think he's an interesting conversation. I do want to talk a little bit about Casey Mittelstadt because it didn't get better for him last night. In fact, last night got a little bit worse, and we saw that reflected in number of shifts, line mates, things like that. And then I just want we can talk briefly about Nathan MacKinnon from last night as well.
Yeah.
Because he breaks out in such a big way against the Buffalo Sabres. And then I don't really think anyone was spectacular last night. But again, I just want to kind of get a pulse check on where he's at. He does pick up a point. He's right back at the top of the league leader in points. So let's get into that, starting with Scott Wedgewood. But I am going to remind you guys about our great friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. How would you like to get through the holidays without having to make your mortgage payment? Well, go to trustedamerican.com to see how they can help you refinance your home and make sure you don't have to make any payments until February of 2025. Trusted American salary-based mortgage consultants want to help you get into a better interest rate and lower your monthly payments. And right now, they will cover the cost of your home's appraisal. It's about a $650 value right there, Megan. Go to trustedamerican.com or scan the QR code on the screen up there in the top corner to see how much money they can save you today. Let's start with Scott Wedgewood here. Gives up 4 goals, and you and I both said last night that there was at least one that we saw that we said, yeah, we'd like for him to have that back. His expected goals against comes in just a hair below 3. He gives up 4. You and I both said there was one that we probably think he would want back. That math lines up pretty well to me. I still don't think Scott Wedgewood is being looked at as a possibility to take over the number 1 job here. But you and I keep saying on repeat, all you are asking for out of your goalie is to make all the saves they should and 1 or 2 that they shouldn't. I feel like through 2 games that we've seen Scott Wedgewood, that's more or less what you got.
It's true. I think back to that first period, Seth Jarvis was snapping pucks on net and did eventually break through in the second period, but I can, off the top of my head, recall some saves that Wedgewood came up with that probably didn't need to, or no, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably wasn't expected to, is maybe the better way for it, because some of those would have been really hard for him to stop, but he did. And I look at the one I didn't like, and it's the Roslovic goal, and it still ends a game where the Avs were too many goals too short. And, there's still an empty net goal that I think would have come their way. I think empty net goals, it's not been a great strategy for them. Yeah. That late push just hasn't really benefited them. And I'm not saying that the coach should stop doing it, but I think they should stop putting themselves in a position where they're chasing the game so late and exposing the net like that.
Well, so let me pause right there. Because we had someone ask, it may have been on a show when you were gone. I was just doing the show by myself, and there was someone who asked, would the Avs consider not pulling the goalie? No, they wouldn't do that. But Megan, is it crazy to think, well, maybe leave him in net a little bit longer? There's this trend going to like pulling your goalie around 3 minutes or 2.5 minutes. Should Jared Bednar kind of be going back to that traditional 60 to 80 second mark where he's pulling the goalie and giving this group of 5 that are elite players a little bit more time to buzz in the offensive zone, have that zone established? I've never been a fan of this team in particular pulling their goalie before a faceoff. They just don't have a strong faceoff guy on this team to feel confident that you are going to win that puck back clean. I don't know. Am I splitting too many hairs here? Or do you think it would maybe be something for them to consider? Hey, this isn't going well. Let's maybe go back to that more traditional way of thinking, around closer to the minute mark instead of the 2:30 to 3 minute mark.
I think it should be evaluated game by game, but in a game like last night where they couldn't establish or keep the zone, absolutely should have been 1 with a little bit less time remaining, and 2 when they could prove to Jared Bednar that they can actually maintain possession in the offensive zone. So it would need to be following a face-off win or at least a successful entry. And I even think there would need to be a couple successful completed passes before you even consider letting the goaltender go to the bench. And even then, I think the strategy has to be a little different from their 5v5 play, because at that point, there were some rush chances against that cost them, or even just their arrivals in their zone coverage just wasn't good enough. Yeah. And so they need to be ready to get back a lot quicker and defend their own blue line a lot better if they are going to leave the net open like that. And so I just don't think last night they had their legs under them to be able to justify pulling the goaltender really any bit early.
Well, and you mentioned having the legs. The other thing too that is a real thing to consider is so many of your top guys are playing such big minutes, and when you're pulling your goalie early, you're asking them to take these long 2.5, 3 minute long shifts. And I do feel like there have been moments where we've seen that puck breaks the other way and they just don't have the legs to get back. This was not meant to be a pull the goalie segment, but I want to get back to Wedgewood. But it is just an interesting thing to think about. For Wedgewood, we're expecting him to probably get one more of these games here over the weekend. I really do look at Wedgewood as a guy that can be massively helpful to Alexander Georgiev by being able to take on a little bit more of a workload here. And I do just feel like he is an overwhelming positive addition to that locker room, to the mentality of the group, to the leadership of that group. And I think is someone who is non-threatening to Alexander Georgiev in a positive way. And I felt like what you got last night, they lost. You had an expected goals against him about 3. He gives up 4. There's 1 that you really don't like, but otherwise he more or less does his job through 2 Scott Wedgewood games. I feel like it's as advertised, and you're getting exactly what you were hoping to get when you traded for him.
I do feel that way about Wedgewood. Even last night, he wasn't the reason that they lost the game. Mm-hmm. And similarly, he wasn't the reason that they were going to win it. He needed more from the team in front of him, and that's just the nature of who he is as a goaltender too. He's probably not going to steal games for Colorado, but he gave them a chance to win it, and Colorado just didn't provide any goal support. I think that's a pretty good, solid backup goaltender. I think that's what you come to expect from them, and not everyone delivers. I think that's what's interesting about Scott Wedgewood is so far, he's delivered in giving them a chance to win. And I look ahead at what it means for Georgiev and in what uses Annunen brought out of him when Annunen got some starts and then Georgiev came back in to sort of reclaim his net. It was a better version of Georgiev on the other side of it. So the way that I see it, I hate that it has to come down to almost this ploy with goaltending to get the best out of Georgiev. But for right now, we've discussed, I think the Avs are buying time. And if that means giving Wedgewood some starts and then getting the best out of Georgiev in his return and trying to sort of reclaim the net and solidify, I'm the true starter in Colorado, the Avs need to string together some wins and some points. I think that's all by design at this point.
I love what you just said there about like, I hate the gymnastics that we're having to do here to get a positive performance out of Alexander Georgiev, but I think you and I could probably both agree. I don't think the organization views Georgiev as any type of long-term solution. I think the way that this season has started has all but confirmed what we talked about coming into this season. Unfortunately for Alexander Georgiev, who by all accounts to you and me is a very nice guy, always willing to chat, nice guy to talk with in the locker room. Seems like an overall just good dude. This is probably it for him in Colorado. Whether he makes it to the end of the season or not, I think is really all that's left to be answered here. And I think they're doing their best with this is the situation we're in for right this minute, and we've got to make the best of it. And if having to do some gymnastics and some, what was the word you used? Finagling?
Yeah.
To get the best out of Georgiev, then that's what you've got to do. You don't have any other choice. And I think Scott Wedgewood has been through two games, but I think he's been exactly what you were looking for.
Yeah. I'd give him some credit. I said, I don't think he's going to steal a game. He did in Buffalo.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you're right.
The Avs had to make up their half of it too, but he let that stay, just a 4-goal deficit and nothing more.
I agree with you. He came in and said, no more.
Yep.
You guys have a chance to get back in this.
Yep, that's enough for tonight.
That's enough. Casey Mittelstadt, clearly still struggling, gets bumped down to third, fourth line at different points last night. Avs are looking for answers with him after such a strong start. Jared Bednar told us that it's a matter of him moving his feet and getting back to that work ethic-based results. To me, Megan, that's all it is right now. Is I think he's gripping the stick a little bit too tight, and he's not moving his feet the way that he was. And he just needs to get that work back up to where it was, and the skill is going to get a chance to shine through. But it's definitely tough right now because he was pretty ineffective last night.
Yeah, I resonate with Casey Mittelstadt a lot right now. Sometimes when I get feedback, and depending on the amount of feedback too, if I get a lot of feedback at once, I get a little overwhelmed with trying to receive all of it and apply it. And I'm not saying that's exactly what's happened with Casey Mittelstadt, but I do get the impression that he's sort of almost paralyzed in what he's trying to do. Because before, when things like at the beginning of the decline for him, he was shooting a lot, but he was holding on to the puck for just a little bit too long. And so the shot quality wasn't really there. He stopped shooting. He has 7 shots in the last 10 games. Nathan MacKinnon has 41. And so I think that's sort of where I am just, if I was in Casey Mittelstadt's shoes, I think he's in his head because he is also still not making the right decisions with the puck. And for such a smart player, that's when you know it's uncharacteristic.
Yes.
And I think that's what's exposing him to some of the defensive mistakes that have led to turnovers. I think he's a better defensive player than we've seen. I also think he is a better physical player than we've seen. And I think on the whole last night, the guys just weren't winning battles. But I think that Casey Mittelstadt also hasn't really been coming up with pucks the way that we normally see. We're not seeing him play below the goal line and find his teammates the way we've seen too. I think he's in his head way too much. You use the word gripping the stick too tightly. I think that's absolutely part of it. And it went from, okay, I'm shooting the puck, but I'm not maybe generating the most meaningful or dangerous chances to now just not really shooting. And I just want to see him. I think he's abandoned his instinct too much because he is such a smart player. I just want to see him like almost tune out the feedback for a second, not because you're not listening, not to be insubordinate, but just go back to your instinct a little bit, Casey.
This to me is the worst that we've seen him play since he arrived in Colorado. And I really do think so much of what you're talking about, he just needs to simplify his game back down. We've seen him, I mean, to your point about the physicality in his play, we saw that in the playoffs.
Yeah.
This was a guy who
he's got a little edge.
Right. Did not shy away, was not afraid to play with a little bit of an edge there, was not afraid to mix things up, was good defensively. Not Val Nichushkin, not the best two-way forward you've ever seen, but was good defensively.
He, as a puck carrier, could evade players, and he protected the puck from being stripped of it so easily. I think he is being stripped of the puck more easily, so that's where some of that lack of physicality is coming into play. But also, it's like like through traffic, he's just losing the puck more than I've seen him before.
Well, he's sticky. You know what I mean? The puck sticks to him. That's what was one of the first things that I noticed.
I like that.
When he got here was that He just, he's one of those guys that you skate through 2 sticks and they each get a stick on the puck and you kick it, you fumble, it hits you in the shin, and he steps out and he's got the puck on his stick. And it's like, what? And he's just not doing that right now. And I think you're right. I think he's paralyzed by indecision at times. I think he's overthinking plays. I think he's holding the puck for too long. And he's not trusting his instinct. And again, I loved him, and people are probably getting sick of hearing me say this. When Josh Manson told me that a few weeks ago about, like, doesn't matter who's in the lineup, if you're hurt, if you're not hurt, if you're down 10 guys, if you got a full lineup, whatever, everything that we do is about work ethic. And how hard are you working? And are you putting yourself in the right positions? And again, I'm not going to say that Casey Mittelstadt isn't working hard. I'm sure he's working hard. But he's got to simplify his game back, and he's just got to move his feet. And he's got to continue. He's got to start doing the things again that we saw him be successful with last year, the beginning of this year, and he's going to be fine. It's a long season. You're going to go through slumps, but what did Logan O'Connor tell us last year? If I can't bring my A game, I always bring my B game.
Yeah.
Casey Mittelstadt's got to find his B game right now.
I think so. Because I think there's pressure too in trying to return to the player who in the opening 10 games was a savior of this team. His point production pace was incredibly impressive. You don't have to be exactly that. Like, ease back into that, work your way back up to that. But it's like he's trying to overcome everything in one shift. And you can't. You have to build back your game shift by shift.
And you got to build back, exactly what the comment on the screen here says right now, you got to build back your confidence. He looks like a guy whose confidence is way down.
Absolutely feel it's a confidence thing.
Let's talk about Nathan MacKinnon. Not just from last night. I thought he was fine last night. Nothing crazy in either direction. He was so big for them against the Buffalo Sabres. And I just kind of want to get your pulse on where Nathan MacKinnon is at. Slumped a little bit there. A Nathan MacKinnon version of the slump. But here's an interesting stat from our guy, Evan Rowell, this morning. Nathan MacKinnon is averaging 23 minutes and 31 seconds of ice time per game. No NHL forward has averaged over 23 minutes a night since Ilya Kovalchuk did it back in 2012, 2013. Colorado has 3 forwards averaging 22 minutes and 17 seconds a night or more right now. Kirill Kaprizov is the only non-Avalanche forward in the NHL averaging that same amount of time. Jared Bednar talks about it all the time. Heavy minutes are problematic for all forwards except for Nathan MacKinnon. I'm not worried about McKinnon's minutes. Your thoughts on how the dog is playing right now?
I think, we talk about PDO and in our evaluation of this team and how it's just going to progress because right now the Avs are benefiting from a lot of misfortune. Their process is a lot better than the overall results seem. That's why I'm critical of the Carolina game because I did not like their process. But bigger picture, I actually think they're doing a lot of things right. I think that's what brought them success on that most recent road trip, especially at the start of it. And I think that Nathan MacKinnon specifically is on the wrong end of misfortune right now. I talked about 41 shots in the last 10 games. That's the league highest. And he's got a 4.9 shooting percentage at the moment. It's not that every shot is poor quality, too. He is just not getting shots through that probably should. It's a lot of bad luck that I think is going to break through. I think breaking through the goal drought was the first phase of it. And I just think that he's going to get rewarded for what he's doing sooner rather than later. But I do think Evan's point around his high usage is a valid one. You mentioned because he is such a trusted player, an important player, he is being put out very frequently and for extended shifts. And when the mistakes get made at the end of those shifts, it's not just Nathan MacKinnon who's had maybe some poor coverage on the back check, but he is a player that springs to mind as of recently. And I think that is part of it, that you're not going to get the best defensively out of Nathan MacKinnon when he's on the ice that much. I think it's true of any players. And I think it sticks out. It's a little more glaring when it's Nathan MacKinnon, but I don't think he's the greatest defender on this team. I think I've liked the hunger and the compete that I've seen. I think that's what brought him success in the Buffalo game. I don't think it was entirely absent last night. I think, in talking about morale and being contagious, I think for MacKinnon, similarly, he can single-handedly take over games, but I don't think he's immune from even being caught up in poor effort around him. I think that a lot of the team last night specifically tried to win the game individually versus working together. And so that's not specific to just Nathan MacKinnon, but I do think that's a part of it too. And so when he gets a little more support, particularly in the top six on the whole, right? Like it feels like a one-line team right now, and even that top line isn't always figuring it out. You look at their first period analytics now, pack a few games, and they're not really good. They're not starting these games very well as a top line. I think they need a little more support from the whole of their depth. And right now, the depth is hurt. It's really depleted. I think that's why seeing a Kiviranta, who just recently had a great night, and Logan O'Connor, who provided some depth contributions, not being able to get that on a nightly basis is costing the Avs in a big way. It's riding their top guys really heavily, and you're not getting the most out of them when they're being used so much. It's true of Cale Makar too. Like there's kind of a sweet spot. Jared Bednar will tell you he'll play Val Nichushkin, Cale Makar as much as he needs to, but there are realities about their limitations over the span of a season, and I think we're seeing a little bit of that limitation right now, especially because the pressure is so high to come up with some wins in these games because they haven't been.
So there's a couple things here, and I wanted to pull up the schedule just so I could make sure I was being accurate. Comment just came through the chat saying, I wonder if Nathan MacKinnon is playing through something, hasn't looked the same, da-da-da-da-da. Nathan MacKinnon has skipped a lot of the optionals recently. He's taken some maintenance days for morning skate. So I think it's reasonable to assume, okay, something's bothering him a little bit, but we've also seen him during those morning skates where he hasn't been on the ice. He's been working out hard off the ice. So we've kind of been saying, okay, well, maybe he's just finding a new regimen here. I think it is reasonable to think that maybe he's playing through something a little bit. Combine that with the minutes. Megan, you got to go back to October 12th. With two exceptions where the Avs got 2 days off, the Avs have played every other night.
Wow.
A lot of it recently has been on the road. They are in the middle of a stretch where they are away from home 20 out of 25 days. This team is not getting, with the injuries, the depleted roster already, upped minutes for the top guys. This team is not getting a lot of rest. Historically, I shouldn't say historically, the last handful of seasons, the Avs have had a lighter start of the season schedule. They're usually always got games in hand on teams that are around them in their division, in their conference. That is not the case this year. The Avs are among the league leaders in games played. And like I said, with two exceptions where they had 2 days off, the Avs have played every other night since mid-October. This has been a gauntlet of a schedule for them right now. And like I said, you compound that with the amount that they are on the road for this entire month. And it's not shocking to me if you do have a couple guys that are having to play through some things right now. Mix in a couple back-to-backs in there as well. Like it's been a tough schedule. They're going to get 2 days off next week. 2 weeks from now, excuse me. They're going to get 2 days off in between being at Vancouver and being at San Jose, only to have that be immediately met with a back-to-back, San Jose, then Anaheim. Then they'll come home and they'll get Seattle, and then it's a Christmas break, and they're going to get 4 days off here, with a couple of those days being fully away from the rink. You cannot punt until that time. You'll be too far out of it. You have to try to win some games, and you have to try to be accruing points here. But I do wonder how good it will be for them to get 4 days off here, for the players that are healthy or healthy-ish to get a couple days just to rest and recover. Not an excuse at all, but you have to you have to acknowledge this is a gauntlet of a schedule they're going through right now.
Yeah, I think putting injury aside for a second, any speculation there, just hearing the emphasis from MacKinnon coming out of this summer on rest and recovery and acknowledging the high mileage that his body takes. This is a high mileage season so far in. And I think there's a reason that he would have sought out more rest and recovery over this off season. Similarly, in bringing on his strength and conditioning guy to the team. That's why some of the optional morning skates have been optional, because the team is doing different things away from the ice with an emphasis on rest and recovery. So I think not being able to rest and recover to their ideal because of this schedule is probably not the best thing, especially with the nightly usage being as high as it is, because they're chasing wins. They are kind of in this place of needing them. To your point, they can't just punt on these games before the Christmas break. I think that adds a pressure that just probably could explain some of the result that we've seen when things haven't gone well.
Yep, I agree. Let's talk about this weekend, because there's a chance that you're getting a guy back. You're going to have some decisions to make on goaltending. You've got a team, the Detroit Red Wings, that are looking like a lottery team again this year. Then you got the New Jersey Devils, who are by most considered to be a Stanley Cup contender. So I want to talk about all that and how Ross Colton fits back into this. This is Guerrilla Sports Off Ice. This segment is brought to you by our great friends down at Landmark Lincoln. Go to landmarklincoln.com to check out the all-new 2024 Lincoln Corsair GT plug-in hybrid. Head on over to landmarklincoln.com. Check out the latest offers and incentives, including their incredible tax incentives on the all-new Corsair GT plug-in hybrids. landmarklincoln.com, or stop into the #1 Lincoln dealer in Colorado to see if you qualify for no payments for up to 90 days. Again, that's landmarklincoln.com, or stop in at the corner of Broadway and Bellevue today. See why they've been Colorado's trusted Lincoln dealer since 1911. And Megan, we got a new partner here. New partner alert, 7 Brew Coffee. We don't have the disco lights over here. I saw you getting ready to celebrate. We don't have the disco lights over here. 7 Brew Coffee. 7 Brew isn't your average coffee shop. It's a one-of-a-kind drive-through and walk-up experience that is redefining your morning, afternoon energy boost, from rich, bold coffee to refreshing energy drinks, real fruit smoothies, teas, and more. 7 Brew has something for everyone with over 20,000 flavor combinations, and the possibilities are endless. You can create a drink that's as unique as you are. Whether you prefer a sweet or strong, iced or hot, we put the power of drink making into your hands at 7 Brew. The fully customizable menu is just the beginning. They believe in cultivating kindness with every cup. Their fast and friendly brew crew is ready to serve you with a smile. Visit their newest location in Firestone. 7 Brew is more convenient than ever. Drive through today and experience the coffee revolution. Megan, you've known me for a while. You know I'm not a huge coffee guy. When we were meeting with the 7 Brew folks, I went up there, and smoothies are great. Energy drinks are great. I even found a couple coffee drinks that I was like, all right, well, I could drink this. So I would say redefining coffee is exactly what they're doing, because you got me, a non-coffee drinker, to drink a cup of coffee. So there you go.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
The options seem endless.
And their new location is very near to Blue Arena up in Loveland, where the Colorado Eagles are at, where we will be soon for some more fun stuff. If you've been to an Eagles game this year, you've seen our faces in the arena. We've been doing some really fun stuff with the Colorado Eagles this season, and I think we got some more maybe in the pipeline here.
Well, we definitely have some things.
We definitely have some things in the pipeline. But if you're heading up to an Eagles game, stop at 7 Brew. And then if you're up in that area, just in general, make sure to stop in. Brand new location, and it's their best one yet. They've got locations all over the place. The one in Firestone is beautiful. Megan, let's talk about, let's start with the goalies. We touched on it briefly last night. We don't have to spend a lot of time here, but what do you do with the goalies this weekend? You've got a back-to-back. I know how I think I would maybe like to see it play out. What are your thoughts on what Jared Bednar should do with his tendies, Detroit, New Jersey, on back-to-back nights?
I think do Wedgewood against Detroit, go to Georgiev for New Jersey, and then for that Pittsburgh game, like Tuesday, I don't know. Dealer's choice, depending on how these games go for them.
Yeah.
I think Georgiev is due the opportunity to see if he's a starter against a playoff contending, Stanley Cup contending team. And the team in front of him is going to be on the second leg of a back-to-back, so they're not going to be at their best. So I think that ratchets up the pressure a little bit on Georgiev. Like, okay, they're really counting on you to be a stopgap in this game because you might not get their best for the full 60 of this game, and it's understandable. So what can you do?
I'm with you 100% on how you just laid that out. I think you give Georgiev the games that would typically go to your starter. And I do also think that you keep a little bit of that mentality of we're playing the guy who we think gives us the best chance to win. But I think you err on the side of Alexander Georgiev is the starter, so we're going to give him the starter minutes. Or the starter games, what you would typically expect, the better competition, the Stanley Cup contenders, the playoff teams, things like that. And you give him a chance to prove that he can play against those teams until he shows you definitively, I can't, or you make a move. And I know before the chat starts lighting up saying he's already proven that he can't play against those teams, as you and I go back to all the time, Megan, the real issue with Alexander Georgiev is just how hot and cold he truly is.
Mm-hmm.
He could come out on Sunday and play a lights out game against the New Jersey Devils, shut him out, look like a Vezina caliber guy, and then 2 nights later against the Penguins, he give up 5 goals in the first period. That's the problem. So I think you give him that benefit of the doubt until you feel like, okay, he's not even turning in the rare great performance. I think you keep going with him until he gives you a hard reason not to.
I think so too, because that's where Wedgewood, with experience with multiple starts in a row, can come in and save you through that period of reset that Georgiev tends to need from time to time, because his game does ride pretty high highs and pretty low lows.
Mm-hmm. Pretty high highs and pretty low lows, I feel like, has been the story of Alexander Georgiev's time here. Is there any world where we trade Georgiev for another goalie? Sure, but I just think that there's a lot that has to go along with that, and that's why we haven't seen that move come to pass yet.
It's a multi-layered trade that requires a high-value prospect, probably a roster player, probably. I'm not saying it's both of those things, but
it might be.
It's definitely not without one of them. Mm-hmm. And it could be both because there's a salary issue.
I was going to say.
They have to clear space to accommodate really any other goaltender that could have a sniff in a starting conversation, has a higher cap hit than Georgiev does presently. It's just the unfortunate way it's been constructed, and now with Wedgewood, even a higher salary than Annunen, the way that they plan to build this team would need to look a lot different, and a lot of it was planned in the offseason. So those forward contracts are also built around this idea. So they would have to change then the construction of the team in front, basically, whether that's from the back end somehow or the forward group, where I think they have the most room to play around with, just because where they have the most flexibility on the back end are some of the lower contracts that don't matter as much. But I guess this is where like an Oliver Shillington contract could be shaved off the top, but it's still not giving you enough space for another goalie contract. So I think that's where it gets complicated.
Well, and the reason I think it would probably include all of those pieces that you said is because of that salary. If you're bringing in someone that you are saying today is an upgrade on Alexander Georgiev, we know he's an upgrade. One, he's probably making more money, so you would need that team to retain a little bit because of what you're just describing with the way that things are built. And two, you'd be asking another team to downgrade in net. There's not a lot of teams that are super excited to do that. I mean, like Anaheim, the reason John Gibson's name keeps coming up is because that's a team that I think would be fine taking Alexander Georgiev back in the sense that, like, they've got their starter who's already inexpensive. They would probably still be shaving money to bring in Georgiev. So that's, because I've seen some people saying, why do we keep talking about John Gibson? Because from a contract and a team standpoint, I think it makes sense. If you're talking about a guy like Mackenzie Blackwood or Karel Vejmelka, who that's probably my preference if you're going to make any type of move, is Vejmelka. You're going to have to give up something valuable, because those are teams that these are younger goalies that still have some upside that those teams probably feel you can tap into. it's just not going to be cheap. It's just not going to be cheap no matter how you slice it. And you have to hope that it works money-wise, or else you're going to have to do a lot of gymnastics to make it work.
Which I think the Avs are in a position to navigate a lot of options, just bringing in a cap expert over the offseason as an assistant GM. But I think that's why they're not finished. I think there's going to be more to come, probably at the goaltending position, but just generally speaking, and it's going to require further evaluation of the cap situation, which requires more information around player availability, injury information. And I think they're waiting a little bit.
This one isn't really, there's not really much to talk about here, but the Avs now sit 4 points out of a playoff spot. You cannot come out of this weekend with no points. Really, you probably can't even come out of this weekend with any less than 2. And you'd really like to have at least 3.
I agree. New Jersey will not be an easy competitor, but you have a lot of opportunity in this Detroit game coming up. I actually think it's like a storybook game in the way that it's written for the Avs to have a bounce back a number of different ways. Detroit's lost their last 4 games, and they're second to last in the Atlantic. This is a team that has struggled and has fallen below expectation in some ways with individual storylines that have been pretty good for them, but there's been a lack of finish. They've been able to bring some of their last games within 1 goal, but they just can't find it. And so it's interesting. I think that when they've needed more goals, they found some of them, but they fall short just one. I think that's really interesting. And it's hard to point to then what that issue is, because it's not exactly goal scoring. They're still coming up with 3 goals in a given game back to back. It's like that 4th one that seems to be a trouble. And they've had, good performances from Lucas Raymond. He's had 4 goals in his last 5, 3 assists. Their PK, it's one of the worst in the league, and it's trending in a bad direction. Avs power play has not been very good. This feels like it has been written for the Avs to correct some of their power play troubles by capitalizing on a weak PK team. They need to stay out of the box themselves. It's kind of first and foremost just the bottom line, the discipline. You just don't like the way some of their man disadvantage opportunities came. And then it's been decent goaltending for Detroit, but it's not impenetrable. And then similarly, JT Compher has not had a great year so far. He's fallen below expectation in terms of being a second-line center, at times even being demoted.
What? You're kidding. You're kidding me. JT Compher didn't turn to a second-line center with that contract?
And Patrick Kane, his production has fallen completely off. That's their second line. It's Compher Kane. Casey Mittelstadt's trying to get his game right. He's got a second-line center opposite him in a lot of those matchups whose game has not been quite where they need it to be. And that second line is just looking to go on the hole, right? Like Vanachukkin's put the puck in the back of the net a couple times here now. I've liked Nikolai Kovalenko's game. It feels like it's the perfect opportunity for the top 6 to reset.
He's trending up too.
I agree. To reset a bit. All right, you've got a second line that's just not really been what Detroit hopes it will be. Capitalize on that. Casey Mittelstadt, capitalize on that. I think that's where it will be unacceptable if they don't come out of Detroit with 2 points.
I'm with you. And they need them. Like they need them. We are I think we said it on yesterday's show. Like we're getting to the point in this season where it's not early in the season anymore. You need the points. You need to start stacking wins here. Last thing, and I thought I saw a comment that I wanted to. Oh, it was just this. I just want to touch on this really fast, and then I'm going to go to the last thing that we're going to talk about here. Have we heard any official statement on a goalie pay limit for the Avs? Just seems like for what they want to pay, they aren't going to get much better without a steal. No, they haven't come out and said we're not paying goalies this way, but that's just what the trend has been. That's what they have. They haven't paid goalies that big contract. Like literally since Patrick Waugh. Like they just haven't done it, especially not under this regime. And, you can't blame them because Darcy Kemper was looked at as kind of is he a starter? Can he get the job done? He had a little bit of an up and down season. I think he was much better than people remember, but then was not good in the playoffs, was very hot and cold. And the Avs got it done. So I think they just embrace this philosophy of the way our team is built, the quality of the players we have, the way that we defend when we're healthy. We need a good starter. We don't need a great one. And they've embraced the philosophy of we can save money in net We can spread that money around the rest of the team. And it's just not working right now. So no, they haven't come out and said we're not going to spend that much on goalies. That's just a philosophy that they've seemed to embrace, and it's worked for them in the past. It's just not going great right now. All right, Megan, we'll wrap up with Ross Colton. We're expecting him back. We don't necessarily. I do wonder if he maybe wouldn't play in Detroit so that he could play in New Jersey. Just the back-to-back maybe is a little bit tough for a player coming off of a 6-week-long injury. How does Ross Colton move the needle for this team, particularly with that second line, middle six that you were just talking about?
I don't know what speed he'll be coming back at, but it feels hard to imagine even Ross Colton ramping back up to game speed and a slightly lesser version of himself. Based upon what we saw to start this year, he has a skill fit in the top six that immediately complemented it. And that's where I think the whole balance of the forward group is thrown off right now, is because the top six isn't working well together. Some of it's probably overusage. I think he just resolves a lot of that problem and also leads to a more balanced attack then for the lines that follow. It's not a slight at Nikita Prishapov or Chris Wagner, whichever forward ends up being edged out of the lineup as a result. They're just not trusted right now to come back and chase in games. And that's the position the Avs have been in lately. I think Ross Colton is a key factor in preventing that from happening, but also just gives them more of a competitive advantage through all four lines.
Yeah, he especially the way that he was starting. Like I told Liv this morning, she was doing Girl Sports Daily, and I said like he was on pace for a career year in every statistical category when it started. And to lose a player who was playing as well as Ross Colton was, stacked on top of the role that he plays on this team, regardless of the production, that hurts. And it's really nice when he comes back in.
Yeah, he was scoring goals. And look, I don't know if it's sustainable. Hi, Chloe.
Hey, hi.
But gosh, do
Chloe's
they just
here.
need goals?
They just need goals. They need offense. They need that power play to start clicking, which was another area where Ross Colton was huge for the Avs before he got hurt. Got anything else before we head into the weekend and then do all this over again on both days?
No, it's happening so soon that we got even more to talk about tomorrow. Hopefully they come out ready from the drop the puck, but also for the full 60. I know those two things are such cliches you hear every coach talk about, but they are a better team than the Carolina game showed, because in the final minutes of the Carolina game, they decided to show up a little bit. She didn't show up with bangs, did she? She didn't. Don't worry.
She didn't show up with bangs.
She's wearing a hat, so I can't say
I guess
for
she
sure.
might have gotten some bangs. Oh, and she won't take the hat off.
She won't let us know.
We'll have to wait till Sunday to see. Yeah, like you said, they're cliches, but they're cliches for a reason, right? It's the formula for winning hockey. Start on time, and you're never going to get a full 60, but you've got to find a way to get 50, 55 minutes plus.
Because make your life easier.
Right.
That late push isn't sustainable for a full 60, but you wouldn't have to do
Right.
that if you were just a little more normal.
Just a little bit more normal. That's going to do it. I'm really hungry. Let's get out of here and get some food. Thomas back there behind the glass again today. Ran all the shows for us today. Big shout out to him. It was great last night having him in the studio. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. This is Guerilla Sports Off Ice. Enjoy your weekend, guys. We'll be back talking to you guys all weekend about the Avs back-to-back. So you've not heard the last of us for this weekend, but enjoy your Friday and have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.